And we are live. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Future Fiction Reads and part of my ongoing series, The Interstellar Exchange and Authors Behind the Page. And I am absolutely delighted to be joined by author and podcaster Adrian M. Gibson. How are you doing today?
Hello, Luke. I'm doing very well. I'm absolutely delighted to be here. Thanks, man.
Good, excellent. It's been we've kind of orbited around each other on social media for quite a while now, so it's
Yeah,
really, really nice to kind of have a face-to-face conversation.
yeah, I agree. It's been a long time coming, but
Yeah. So how's it going? I mean, how's your Spiffbo experience been? How's that been going emotionally and all the stuff that comes with Spiffbo?
honestly, pretty chill. like, I can't really, I can't really compare it to a lot of the experiences that other friends have had. Like anecdotally, there's a lot of heartbreak and drama around who makes it to the semifinals and the finals and all that kind of stuff. And honestly, like my experience has been very smooth. Like
Yeah.
I kind of distanced myself enough from it that I wasn't obsessive or overly invested in like what's happening now and who's reviewed my book and blah blah blah.
Mm.
It was just kind of like, oh, cool, I got to the semifinals, and I'm like, oh, cool, like I got to the finals. And then now that because I was the first finalist, like I was on my own for about a month before
Yeah.
other finalists started trickling in. And now we have our shared Discord group, and it's really nice. Like we're all supporting each other and just chatting and getting to know one another. So at this point, like it doesn't feel overly dramatic or
Mm.
intense. It's kind of like we've got this group of 10 and everyone's really friendly with each other, and I'm just kind of at the point where like whoever wins wins. So
That's really good that you got that kind of chill attitude because I know a lot of authors like they get really stressed
yeah, yeah.
about it and like they're following the reviews and like they're on tenterhooks whether they're going to make the semis and the final. So that's it's a cool approach to kind of take. So you're not really you, you're not giving yourself like emotional a heart attack by
No, I mean,
following everything.
there's enough room for that shit in regular life. So like,
Yeah, you don't
it's
need
about.
it this
I mean,
one.
it's a matter of what are you willing to um, invest your time in, and also like the emotional baggage that you're willing to take on.
Yeah.
But overall, it's like all of the finalists are really cool people, and Mark has been amazing, Mark Lawrence. So I have nothing stressful about this competition so far, which has been very good for me, I think, because,
Yeah.
you know, raising two young boys at home is already stressful enough. So I think I've gotten to a part in my life and my daily routine where I can like compartmentalize
Yeah.
what do I need to focus on and when. And Spiffbo is just kind of this thing that like exists a bit more in a bit more of a nebulous way,
Mm.
where I can enjoy it when there's stuff to enjoy and avoid it when there's that's too stressful.
Yeah, it's such a long process as well that you
Oh
kind of
yeah,
just
dude.
let it fade in the background,
Yeah,
don't you?
yeah, yeah.
Until
Yeah, because
definitely,
like
and
a friend of mine was like, when does the finalist get announced? I'm like, I don't know, like March, April.
yeah,
It feels
it's
like
like
such a long
March
time
and then it
away.
starts again at the end of March. It's just
Right.
on a constant loop.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So
I'm not judging this year. I judged the previous 2 years. I've been a judge with before we go. So I'm I'm tempted next year, but we'll see how my schedule because I think my channel's getting busier and busier at the minute. So
mhm.
I'm not sure I'll be able to like, especially at the beginning where you've got your 30 books per judge team and you got to get through them. It takes you away from a lot of your personal TBR.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
I'm not sure. I'll see if I want to do it or not though.
No one's forcing you. So
No, exactly. Lamia is here.
hi,
Hello,
Lamia.
Lamia.
How are you?
How you doing? Cool. And Shells is here as
Shells.
well. Evening to you, love.
Hello.
Excellent, excellent. And you've I think I saw on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it that you've been nominated in is it the Ink Awards or
The
something
Indie Ink
today?
Awards.
Ink
Yeah.
Ink Awards, that's it.
But that's
Yeah.
another one where it's like um I'm starting to realize like how long the processes are for a lot of these things.
Mm.
And for the Indie Ink Awards, it's like a lot of people have been probably seeing, if you're in the SFF community, last couple days, where authors are like, I got nominated, I got nominated, I got nominated, which is awesome. But then, like, looking into what actually the Indie Ink Awards entails, it's like you get nominated, and then there's a process where all of those nominees in each category get voted on, and then the top 10 are the ones that, so it kind of is like in a mini spiffbo in each category,
Mm.
kind of thing. And then those 10 books get read and judged by a team of judges, and then they pick the top one in each category. So even then, like, a nomination is awesome. And I'm starting to learn how to appreciate like all the little things as well as the more monumental things.
Yeah.
But I still understand there's a lot left in that process. And even then, like, the finalists, the winners for the Indie Ink Awards won't get announced until like September, October next year. So I'm kind of like, yeah, just like let it happen.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, Mushroom Blues then is your debut novel, which came out this year. For anyone who hasn't read Mushroom Blues yet, I'd show mine, but my Broken Binding edition's late. Otherwise, I'd be. I was like, "Where's my edition?" And they
I'll
apologized
email them
profusely.
and chide them for their shipping, their
Yeah,
tardiness.
I think their Black Friday sale was quite popular, so they're a little
Oh,
bit
dude,
behind. They
yeah,
got a bit of a backlog. Yeah, but
yeah.
my
I can imagine.
my hardcover is on the way though of Mushroom Blues.
Perfect.
But for
Signed
anyone
hardcover.
who's not read it, and if you haven't, what are you doing with your life? Pitch it to our lovely viewers today.
So Mushroom Blues is my debut novel. It is book one in the Hoffman Report series, and also the Fungalverse shared universe. So it's a universe that I'm going to write more than one series, and they're going to take place in different timelines. But the Hoffman Report specifically takes place 2 years after a war called the Spore War, which sees a human government and military attacking and occupying an island nation of fungals. And so these fungals are essentially human mushroom hybrids. That's like a biology thing that's in my head and goes back like, you know, tens of thousands, if not millions of years. But the fungal people, you know, just imagine them like, here's one right here. This is one of the main characters, Koji. If you can imagine just like a human being with like a mushroom cap on their head, or mushrooms growing from their head, mushrooms growing from their body and their shoulders, and they're able to communicate with each other almost telepathically in a way. In this case, more empathically. And also they're able to manipulate their environment. So their city is made of mushrooms and mycelium, and they can control certain aspects of it, and mycelium can grow from their bodies and do certain things. And what ends up happening is 2 years after the Spore War, it's winter, terrible occupation, people are starving, food shortages, refugees from the war. And we find ourselves in the viewpoint of Henrietta Hoffman, who is a human homicide detective. And she is on a beach. This is literally like first 2 paragraphs. She's on a beach, and so no spoilers, finds the dead body of a fungal child, and she is tasked with investigating what happened to that child, who killed them, and that sends her off across the city of Neokonoko to investigate what happened, and she's forced to team up with a mushroom beat cop named Koji Nameko. And so the two of them, begrudgingly, because Henrietta is quite racist, the humans are very racist towards the fungal people, begrudgingly set off across Neokonoko, coming across gangsters and the human military and a corrupt police force and all kinds of people in order to solve this murder.
Yeah, it's a brilliant book, by the way. I read it earlier in the year. It's very uncompromising in its themes and characters. You'll really like it, Lamia. You will like it, definitely.
I can't wait to read your book too.
Oh God, it's so good. It's so good.
Heard.
But like Mushroom Blues, I think for me, it almost defies like pinning it into a genre, because I think it's sci-fi, it's fantasy, it's crime thriller, it's social commentary. I mean, what was that your intention when you wrote it, or did these things just kind of organically come through the writing process?
Most of it was organic. I mean, I knew that I was genre bending when I set out to do it, um, but I wasn't specifically like, these are the genres that I am aiming to, satisfy the expectations of or what have you. It's kind of like I landed on crime thriller, murder mystery, police procedural as sort of like the structural framework of the book, just because those are genres that I really love, and that was something that
Mm,
I knew I could do based on my reading and watching experience. And then everything else that came from that was just an extension of my world building and just whatever crazy tangents my imagination wanted to take me in. So yeah, like it does bend a lot of genres. It does. That's why I applied for both SPFBO and SPSFC, because I'm like, it's enough fantasy, it's enough sci-fi. Like I can
yeah.
pull that off. There are like touches of cyberpunk in there, not so much with
Yeah.
the technology, but more with like the atmosphere and themes. And then very, very heavy doses of murder mystery and police procedural and crime thriller and whatnot. But even then, like I'm playing around with certain tropes and trappings of those genres in
Mm,
order to, for me, it felt very natural to write them. But after the fact, talking to friends and through doing interviews and stuff like that, specifically one that I did with Stephen Orion, author of The Warrior, he and I started getting into this topic, and he was talking about a fantasy book that he wrote that was kind of like fantasy noir. And that conversation made me realize, like, okay, like unconsciously, I'm putting effort into hitting certain beats and uh, creating a flow and a pace that fits a certain genre expectation, and at the same time being able to twist and subvert certain tropes and certain expectations in order
mm.
to hit them and satisfy them, but at the same time make them more evocative and interesting.
Like, you're obviously influenced by the cyberpunk and detective crime thriller, and the setting as well is very kind of influenced by Japan in a way as
Mm-hmm.
well. I mean, did you find that like fine line between creating a world that is inspired by Japan without kind of falling into derivatives and slipping into cultural appropriation?
Yeah, that was something that I was very conscious of.
Mm,
And even like while I was going through the process of writing this book, Adrian Tchaikovsky had read like the first 10 chapters, and we had a conversation about this exact thing, like an email exchange about this exact thing. And from my perspective, it was kind of like I knew that I was sort of threading the needle of this very difficult subject matter, a very fraught time in Japanese history as well, like very much inspired by World War II and post World War II
mm,
occupied Japan. But I knew the perspective that I was coming from was so much of it was fueled by an intense adoration and love and appreciation for this culture, but also the amount of time that I've spent just over the course of my entire life absorbing as much knowledge that I can about Japan, Japanese history, Japanese customs, religion, whether it be Shinto or Buddhism, food and technology and familial structures and all these different kinds of things like really fascinate me. And my wife and I had the pleasure of going to Japan a few years ago. This was like just before COVID. So it was like the year before COVID, um, that that we went for our 1 year anniversary slash, postponed honeymoon kind of thing. And it was beautiful.
slash research mission.
Secretly have my notebook with me the whole time. I was just taking notes about everything. And that for me was like it was an affirmation of everything that I learned and invested my time in up until that point. And so going into this book and creating this world, I knew very much that cyberpunk itself Sorry for the background noise. My kids are having a raucous time outside. Um, I knew cyberpunk as a genre that I'm very much in love with and very inspired by has a lot of, I would say, I can't remember the exact term. Yeah, all travel is a covered research mission. That's 100%. Um, it's kind of like a misappropriation of Asianness, and there's a specific term about like um, specifically how fiction can apply misperceptions of Asian culture onto something like cyberpunk. And for me, it always felt like a veneer that was
Mm.
very shallow and, other than like the visual aspect of it, very pointless. Um, which is disappointing for me as someone who loves this genre so much, to go back and think about it in hindsight and to rewatch these movies or reread books, to be like, okay, obviously in the 80s when cyberpunk was coming up, Japan was like the up and coming superpower, aside from obviously the United States and the Soviet Union as, two halves of the Cold War. But Japan specifically as like a technological superpower, manufacturing superpower, the soft power of Japan in the ways in which it was able to permeate the global sphere with its technology, with its vehicles, with its pulp culture, anime, manga, video games, all these different things really ingrained itself into the minds of the people who are creating these things. And so from their perspective, they're thinking like, okay, if I'm going to write the future is going to be Japanese.
Mm.
Um, and in a lot of ways that has come true, but not necessarily in the way that um, they perceived it or the way that they extrapolated it. And so from my perspective, I'm like, okay, Japan is this country that really inspires me, and I love so many aspects of it. How can I treat this world and the race of the fungal people, who I even created a language for. I even created a religion for them and a history and all these different aspects of the world building. Everything that I've put into it has been through the perspective of like writing a love letter to Japan in a way. So for me, it feels really genuine. And even though the main character is racist, and even though there's a lot of racism and alienation between the humans and the fungals, and the fact that the humans are occupying this nation, that for me is a very fraught dynamic. But at the same time, I've approached it from a way that is very genuine and very thoughtful, that hopefully it comes across to the reader that way and allows room for the more difficult conversations to happen.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really the one when you were talking about this veneer of kind of Japanese future, um, like the original Blade Runner film, I think it's it the whole world that they have, it's with the neon lights and the pouring rain and this very kind of Tokyoinan kind of landscape. Um, like when you kind of come down to if you start analyzing the movie, it actually is just a kind of overlay,
Mm-hmm.
just to create a cool environment rather than
Yeah.
actually having any significant meaning.
Exactly. Yeah, and I just looked it up just for my own personal reference, but it's kind of like, um, even though the term is outdated, but like Orientalism.
Yeah.
But in this case, it's like a techno Orientalism, and what ends up happening is that packaging does nothing. If you took it away, it would change nothing about the story itself.
Yeah.
And for me, if you took that away, it would completely destroy the story. The story wouldn't exist without these things that I have um, really embedded into the structural foundation of this story and of this world. And so for me, like, it was very purposeful, everything that I did and every choice that I made, because it's almost like a commentary and a critique of where cyberpunk has come from,
Mm.
while also exploring ways in which this particular world can expand upon themes that cyberpunk um, really invested itself in and developed over time.
Yeah, and I mean that certainly came across for me when I was reading Mushroom Blues for sure. Um, but how do you how do you write a character like Hoffman, which you know the reader's not going to like at the
Yeah, yeah,
beginning
yeah,
at
yeah.
all, but kind of manipulate the reader to keep reading and to keep finding out about the character, even though they might actively
Right,
dislike them.
right.
That must be quite
That
difficult.
that was a very tricky balance because yeah, like Hoffman, she's super jaded, very much like in a position where she doesn't want to be in this place. She's mycophobic, so it's like literally she doesn't like mushrooms from a culinary standpoint or just like seeing them, touching them, anything like that.
Hmm.
So she doesn't want to be here. She doesn't like the fungal people, and that's something that can easily bounce people off at the beginning. But my hope is that I've allowed enough room. What I did at the beginning of the book was very intentional to establish Hoffman's character, and she's very much a dislikable character at the beginning, and you might not even like her by the end, but to trickle in moments where you as a reader are signaled that she has the capacity to change. The degree to which she changes is up to question, and the degree to which a single moment affects her is also fluctuating. And then the other pillar of that was Koji. So Koji Nameko is the mushroom cop that she's partnered with, and the whole purpose of this book was to essentially give Henrietta the opportunity to open her eyes and awaken to the things that she thought were her perceived reality for the entirety of her life, or at least her experience in Neo Kanoko, and then to be confronted with a potential for another way, another path.
Hmm.
And Koji is kind of the person who he's got like, he's like the Michelangelo of this book, and he's just there with a hammer and chisel, and he's just like slowly chiseling away at Henrietta, bit by bit. And so for Koji, a lot of people who've read the book tend to really love him,
Yeah,
which makes me happy because he's my absolute favorite character
I
that
love him. I think he's
I've
great.
written. And he acts as like an ideal foil for Henrietta to give you a sense that like, okay, here's this person who has done despicable things, who thinks despicable things, but there's a capacity for change, and Koji is the one who is slowly opening her up to the possibilities of what she could change about herself, or like ways in which she could change her perception, and realities and truths that she didn't necessarily perceive before, particularly like about the fungal people and how the fungal people interact with each other on a community level, on an individual level, how they think, how they go about their daily lives. These are things that Henrietta is she's confronted with over the course of the book, and Koji is the kind of catalyst for that. So I think giving readers glimpses of hope that she could change, and then also Koji being the one to sort of catalyze that change bit by bit over the course of the book.
Yeah.
So most of the people who bounce off the book, they're like, you know, couldn't get past like the first 5 chapters or 10 chapters, and I'm like, well, she's not going to change that fast. She does change quite fast, and that's also like a counter critique that people have said, like, her opinions change too fast over the course of the book, like a 180 kind of thing. But that's just a matter of personal subjective opinion, and it's also a matter of like, this is the first book that I published, and I'm always learning, and there are some things that I'm like, cool, I can take these experiences from Mushroom Blues and really apply them to everything that I write next. And artists are constantly evolving, and so we learn from
Mm.
our mistakes, and at the same time I'm like, I'm really happy with what I was able to accomplish with this book. And at the same time, it is very interesting for me, sort of as like a social experiment, how people react to Henrietta and what their threshold is for continuing with that journey and seeing how it comes to fruition. Because so much of her storyline was inspired by um, there's a guy, a musician in the United States, um, and I'm just gonna Daryl Davis is his name. So he's a musician from the U.S., like a blues musician, and he personally has converted uh, members of the Ku Klux Klan out of the KKK,
Wow.
and like hundreds of people. And so what he did is basically just like have conversations with people, and it's kind of like racism is often not obvious to the people who are racist unless they're confronted with the other in a negative way or a way that shows them that their preconceived notions of that other were completely false.
Mm.
And so the negative is the most common because, that's what their racism is built upon. That's what their surroundings, whether it be like their community, their friends, their group. If you're in the KKK, like other members of the KKK are sort of self-perpetuating this othering of black people, of whomever. And so
It's an echo
what
chamber that just keeps increasing in volume,
exactly,
isn't it? Yeah.
exactly. And so what Daryl Davis ended up doing is just having conversations with members at the bar. And through those conversations, those Ku Klux Klan members realized like, here's this black guy who I've just kind of like packaged under blackness, and therefore I don't like you, I hate you, I despise you, everything that you stand for. They realize this person's human and we can have a conversation. We have the same struggles in life, we have the same desires, the same hopes, the same fears. So much of us are just sharing the same human experience.
Mm.
But it takes direct confrontation with the truth of someone's humanness in order to start to chip away and crack that preconceived sort of it's like you can think of it as like a building. So it's like that foundation of racism that just accrues over time and turns into a monument or a building to racism.
Mm-hmm.
And so Henrietta needs someone like Koji in order to be like, here's why these things that you think are wrong. Here's my perspective on certain institutions like the military or the police. Here is my perspective on what happened during the war and what's happening now. Here is a glimpse inside fungal community, whether it be at a temple or a restaurant, experiences with food and things that Henrietta was very fearful of. Koji is able to sort of like acclimatize her to these different things and make her realize, well, shit, fungal people are not that different from us.
Mm. I love the journey through that she has through food in the book. There's some quite comical moments, some some light moments to alleviate the seriousness of the thing, but there's some great moments with her and the food. And you inject quite a lot of the music as well into the book, which is really interesting as well.
All right, you cut out for a sec. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry.
Okay.
I was just saying. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. No. And you also inject that kind of love of music in there as well, because Henrietta has some music playing in a car quite a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like I love food, so food is a part of it. I love music, and so music is a big part of it. Specifically, in the case of music, it was kind of like a thing that started out as a bit of a shtick, where it's like Henrietta's, she's in her car and she wants to listen to music, and so that got me thinking about like the level of technology, and I was like, cassette tapes. Like I love cassette tapes, giving off kind of like a late '90s vibe, and those cassette tapes ended up becoming something deeply personal to her, where she inherited this cassette collection from her father. And that sort of acts as, it's kind of strange that it's like people have their safe spaces, the place that they feel very comfortable Henrietta
Mm.
feels very comfortable like sitting in a car listening to a cassette tape, which is why I have like multiple sort of segue scenes where she's in a
Mm.
car and she pops in a cassette tape, and and eventually like obviously Koji tags along with her, so it's kind of like he's intruding on her
On a safe space.
yeah, on her safe space. And so these cassette tapes ended up being a really cool um, kind of characterization thing for Henrietta, where I was able to dig into her past and tell a little bit about her father, talk about the music and how that kind of founded the sort of bedrock for her relationship with her dad. But then also um, how that music ended up being kind of like a reverse climatization thing where Henrietta was able to introduce Koji to something.
Mm.
And so the two were able to bond in both directions, essentially. And also, I was able to use each song that she plays during the entire book to throw in like references to friends and both in like the indie SFF community and the like people who have traditionally published books like Nicholas Eames and Adrian Tchaikovsky, and just be able to like throw nods to them in there and um, little
Yeah, that was
cool
fun.
references.
That was fun to see. I was like, oh, I know that person. Oh, I know that person. That's great fun. Yeah, that kind of like introducing, he introduces food, she introduces music. That's a lot what you were basically saying about this conversation that this
Yeah,
blues musician would have with a KK. It's a sharing of information that breaks that kind of cultural construct that they've been
exactly.
stuck in
Yep.
because of what they've been, their prejudices and this echo chamber that they've been kind of stuck in. Really
Hmm.
interesting.
Yeah, and I think that's something that really unites people just
Mm.
across space and time, across cultures. Um, when I first came to Ecuador, I didn't speak Spanish, but I was able to communicate with my now wife's parents through body language and food, and these are kind of universal languages.
Yeah.
Music can be a universal language. Food can be a universal language. The same way that love can be a universal language. So um, that kind of clashing of cultures of the Japanese fungal people and the Caprinian humans provided a lot of fertile ground
Mm.
to explore the ways in which cultures on the surface clash, specifically through a war, but at the same time, there is this sort of um, cross contamination, if you will.
Yeah, definitely. And food is such a great way of communicating because I mean,
Mm-hmm.
me and my partner Mel, we haven't been for a few years because of COVID and everything, but we used to go to Greece every year.
Mm-hmm.
And the Greeks, the food is embedded
Yeah.
in their way of life and their culture. And we've made lifelong friends there now of people who own tavernas and people who own the bars, and we've got to know each other through their food, and it's such a powerful
Mm-hmm.
communication tool, particularly if you don't know the language of
Yeah.
that particular culture as well. It's great
Yeah.
stuff.
And plus, like, if you go to another country and you go to a restaurant, that's probably like the easiest opportunity to actually learn a little bit of that language,
Mm,
because it's a place where the the act of customer service kind of forces the person, and obviously it's like most people who are working at restaurants are willingly doing this.
mm,
It forces them to communicate with you, and there's just multiple points of contact throughout that experience, and you're talking to the server, you're listening to the people around you, you're looking at a menu and you're thinking like, okay, here's this thing that I'm familiar with, maybe it has pictures, maybe it's written in two languages or multiple languages. There are so many opportunities for you to disseminate information about the culture and about the food and the language through this very singular experience of like, go to a restaurant or go to a bar, and you will learn something when you're there.
absolutely. Lamia food both
Yeah,
highlights individual people. Yeah, it certainly does,
100%.
and particularly in Greece or any Mediterranean um, uh, country where the businesses are usually always family run.
Hmm.
So when you enter their restaurant or their bar, you're entering their home in a way. So
Hmm.
they welcome
100%.
you as such, and it's just such a lovely culture. It really is.
Yeah, I remember this one trip I did. This was when I was living in Berlin, and my girlfriend at the time. We went on a trip to Croatia, and hello, Sam Stokes.
Hello, Sam. Welcome.
So we went to Croatia. This was for, I think we went for 6 days or so. Flights were dirt cheap because we were flying from Berlin.
Mm.
Flight was like an hour and a half, or like 2 hours. A very very short flight. And what ended up happening, we were staying in multiple places, but we ended up in the city of Split. And while we were there, we just wandered around. We were like, what do we want for dinner? And we just ended up like stumbling into this like mom and pop restaurant that had probably, I would say, like 5 tables. And the son was working the floor, and the mom was in the kitchen. So it's just the two of them. It was the mom and the son. And the whole time we were able to like smell like the kitchen was open. It felt very much like this was just like an extended part of their house. Like if you just
Mm.
went through a single door, you'd end up going into their house. And you can smell everything from the kitchen. You could watch the mom cook. The son was very kind and was just like, giving us house wine and treating us very, very well. We learned a bit of Croatian and just had a nice conversation with them. And then the mom serves us this meal, and it's literally the best octopus that I've had in my entire life. But it was like an octopus and potato stew. And it was just phenomenal. Like it was absolutely phenomenal. And we just left that restaurant. We were there for like 3 hours. And
Wow.
we just left there and we started walking around Split in the evening. And we're just thinking back on this, like what just happened? Like that was such a beautiful moment where you're able to enter into the lives and the home of other people. And that tells you so much about them. The quality of the food tells you so much about them,
Mm.
about like the care that they put into it, the probably the fact that that recipe has been in that family for generations, and the kindness that they show by giving that food to other people is really beautiful.
Yeah, it really is. So why mushrooms, Adrian? What is this fascination with fungi and mushrooms that you wanted to create an entire race based on
It's my whole life, man.
it?
It really is. It's one of those things that just kind of has been there forever. My love of Japan has been there for a really long time, and my love of nature has just been embedded in me since I was a kid. Uh, Growing up on Vancouver Island in British Columbia, on the west coast of Canada, just I grew up like in the suburbs, but it's it's kind of like, I mean, this is very different from England. It's like rural suburbs in England versus rural suburbs in Canada. It's a very different thing.
Mm.
So it's like, yes, there are neighbors directly in front of you and on either side and behind you, whatever. It's like typical North American suburbs, but walking for like less than 5 minutes, you end up in a forest. And so my I have three older brothers, but the one who's the second youngest, we're about like a year and a half apart. So what we'd ended up doing is like, I mean, this is like the last vestige of the latchkey era, but like our parents would be like, okay, go do whatever you want. You're home from school, finish your homework, and then go play for a few hours
Mm.
and come back for dinner. But they would just like let us go off and wander, and we just end up spending like 3-4 hours in the forest and running around. We built tree forts. I mean, I'm sure they're destroyed now, but we had tree forts that we like built in the forest, and we'd bring like steel hammer and nails from my dad's garage and stuff like that. We'd have pine cone fights. We'd have sword fights with sticks. And yeah, we just like mess around and get dirty, and it was beautiful. What we ended up doing is like we'd always knock over logs, and you're a kid, you break shit. So you're
Yeah.
just like, oh, here's this dead, like this fallen tree. I'm just gonna smash it in half and see what's there. What you end up finding is like there are tons of bugs underneath that tree. You look at the inside of the tree and you sort of learn about what the interior of a tree looks like. You learn about decay, you learn about all these different things, and obviously with decay comes fungi.
Mm.
And so I was just constantly, exposed to mushrooms from a very young age. And it's like anyone who looks at mushrooms online is like, it's weird shit, like crazy colors, strange shapes, weird
Mm.
textures. There's just something so alien about mushrooms, and in a way for me that is like more um, enticing and drives my curiosity than turns me away from it. So it's just like all throughout my childhood that, and just absorbed in nature and messing around in the forest. And then in high school and university, starting to learn a bit more about mushrooms um, in terms of their biology, in terms of their culinary applications and cooking with them. I worked at a restaurant in university where I learned a lot more about certain types of mushrooms and how they can be applied to certain dishes or cooked with certain things, and foraging and all that kind of stuff as well. And then psychedelics. And so it's kind of like there are multiple pillars for my appreciation and experiences with mushrooms. And it's like it started out as like nature-based curiosity and got more academic, got more culinary, and then in my 20s was very much expanded by the psychedelic applications of it, and using psychedelics myself and understanding the ways in which certain compounds interact with the human mind, and getting me really deep into, you know, thought processes about
Mm.
consciousness and our place in the universe and how the cosmos interconnects and this kind of stuff. And that's where I started to discover writers like Terence McKenna, and Paul Stamets, who's very much about mushrooms from the perspective of conservation and environmentalism, but also applications in engineering and manufacturing and stuff like that. And then you have Aldous Huxley as well. Really opened my eyes to, not specifically he writes about mushrooms, but there's a book called The Doors of Perception that really got me into thinking about how consciousness works,
Mm.
and how these substances, which institutions have deemed illegal or immoral, have been able to kind of work in conjunction with the human mind to alter our perceptions of the world.
Mm.
He was specifically writing about mescaline, but you can also apply some of those thought experiments to something like mushrooms or acid or DMT or all manner of psychedelics.
That's fascinating. That's absolutely fascinating. It's kind of. I mean, I in my early 20s, I moved from my mum's home and went to London and lived in London for 6 years, and definitely went in. Got into the dance drug culture for a
Mm-hmm.
good 4 years. But I had some of the best times I've ever had, and I met
Yeah.
some of the best people, and also the discussions you'd get into at 3 in the
Mm-hmm.
morning. You just sit and have these discussions that without any inhibitions. It was a freedom that you had then, and I would never do it again. But it's a precious time in my life that
Mm-hmm.
I really appreciate. And I think, and I love the way you talked about, like, as a kid being, let out into the thing, because I mean I'm probably of a similar kind of age and era where, when I was a kid, we had a massive common public land,
Mm-hmm.
like literally a minute from our house. And I kind of feel sorry for kids these days that they don't have that freedom to express their imagination. I mean, we would get
100%.
sticks and
Yeah.
pretend to be soldiers on the
Yeah.
battlefield and
Yeah. Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
And that's kind of done on electronic devices now rather than going
Right.
out and thing. And it's kind of an umbrella statement, but I think a lot of children are missing out on that, which nourished me as a child for certain.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, for me as a parent now, I really I understand the things that gave me independence and freedom as a kid.
Mm,
And obviously there are sort of social and environmental limitations that Ecuador has versus Canada, right? Ecuador, it's like I have two little blonde kids in a Latin American country. Like I'm not just gonna be like, hey guys, like go fuck off into the neighborhood and like do whatever you want, because there's a possibility that they could get abducted.
yeah.
Versus where I grew up in Canada, which is like everybody knows everybody, and I think it was just a generational thing, not just generational for kids, but generational for parents, where social media has sort of ruined the experience in a lot of ways, because it sort of lays out every possibility for you. Whereas our parents were kind of rolling with that parenting style of like blissful ignorance in a lot of
Mm,
ways, where they're like, I assume my kid's not like doing terrible shit. I hope they're not. And then, they're going to school, they're getting good grades, and life is okay. But now, obviously, we're inundated with so much about how how the world can essentially like ruin your child in myriad ways,
yeah.
both environmentally and culturally, but on an individual level, within a family. And so I've made a point of trying to get my kids out as much as possible. Like we got back yesterday afternoon, but we spent the weekend at my in-laws' farmhouse. So this is like the farm where my father-in-law grew up, and it's a big piece of land. It has mandarin trees, like mandarin orchards and avocados and cows and sheep and chicken. And he built a farmhouse there. So it's like his sister still lives there, and she tends to
Mm,
the farm. And then he built a farmhouse so that we can go there and just hang out for the weekend. Like fire up the grill and cook some delicious food,
excellent.
all this kind of stuff. But those kinds of experiences is like, yeah, just let the kids run off and play, like go throw rocks in the river, go like run around in the field, get dirty, dig up some mud. On Saturday afternoon, we ended up in the Amazon, because where this farmhouse is, it's like a 2-hour drive, to basically just like a big valley that goes all the way down to the Amazon, and then just like
Yeah.
opens up into this like
Wow.
massive swath of trees. So yeah, like my wife's cousin was like, "Hey, come check out this new property that we bought," and we went there with them. We had lunch, and we just ended up like on the outskirts of the Amazon for an afternoon. And like my boys just, you get bit by mosquitoes. That's life, but you can run around and have fun and look at bugs and poke mushrooms and, you know, like following trails of leafcutter ants. Like those are the things that kids can really cherish
Mm,
as they get older. And I think a lot of people don't necessarily get that kind of experience anymore, especially with the ways that depends where you live, of course, but
yeah, definitely.
the advance of modernity has kind of robbed a lot of people of that.
Yeah, I think social media, in a way. I mean, I'm not a parent, but you might feel this. But I think social media, the internet, has simultaneously made us aware of the dangers out there for our children, but has also amplified it to a point where we are afraid to actually
Yeah,
go out and have a bit of fun.
yeah, it's like it's fear-based helicopter parenting.
Yeah, yeah,
And like people don't it doesn't even have to apply to parents and
mm,
their relationships with their kids. It's like people can helicopter themselves
yeah,
and essentially stifle themselves from doing things that they otherwise wouldn't have the fear to do. So it's kind of like a perpetuating cycle of anxiety that ends up stifling you more than benefiting you.
yeah. Absolutely. That's why it's important to go out to these places,
Yeah.
have nature nourish your soul, and just
Yeah.
put your phone down for a good few
Yeah. Yeah.
days.
There's a term in Japanese. So it's like something that doctors can prescribe to you. Um, but the term in English is called forest bathing. But in Japanese it's called shinrin yoku. And so doctors will literally like give you a prescription to be like, go into a forest
That's
uh,
brilliant.
as a deterrent for anxiety and depression and these kinds of things. So it's kind of like the ways in which modernity subconsciously encroaches on your mind through everyday life. You know, I was talking to a friend recently about this crazy fact that is like, I was actually my co-host MJ Kuhn on SFF Addicts. This crazy fact that the ways in which human beings have developed architecture, and you look at architecture and the development of it over the course of thousands of years, we're going from like adobe huts and things like that still feel a bit like natural parts of the landscape, and over time, the beauty and the natural aesthetics of architecture have gone away. So even if you look back at like Gothic churches and you know, you see Roman temples and Renaissance architecture, there's still beauty there, and there's still ways in which you can look at that and encapsulate aspects of nature.
Mm.
But in like the modern era, especially within like the last 200 years, it's just become so angular. Yeah, Diana A is talking about brutalism. Brutalism is the perfect example of it.
Yeah.
It's very rigid architecture. It's very angular. Um, it is very bleak. And what this ends up doing is like the architecture actually becomes a reflection of our internal state of mind. And architecture can affect our emotional and psychological state. And so what psychologists have ended up discovering is that the human mind reacts to shapes in the environment in such a way that over sustained periods of time, that environment, say if you're in a room and you have fluorescent white lights and it's just very angular and very unnatural, that is going to psychologically embed your mind in a state of depression and anxiety. And so when you go out into nature through something like sunbathing, that is actually like a psychological trigger for your mind to be like, there's asymmetry here. And that asymmetry actually allows your mind the space to relieve itself of this flood of endorphins and hormones that lead to depression and anxiety and whatnot. And so it's like you could look at nature as like an upper, like MDMA or something like that.
Yeah.
And then you look at like human built angular environments like houses and offices and blah blah blah. Those are like depressants.
Yeah.
And it's directly linked to our psychology, and it's directly a representation of how we perceive the world and how that simple perception of sunlight and leaves and trees and asymmetry kind of feeds into our minds and rewires our emotional and mental states. Yeah, exactly. Like Diana hit it on the point. Yeah, it's just like a perpetuating cycle of like cheap. We've basically got like prefabricated architecture, but what that ends up doing is that ends up perpetuating this state of emotional and psychological decay in the population who is succumbing to that environment.
And that applies to clothing and electrical devices that are specifically designed to only last like a couple of years. So you are pressured to go and then buy and get one. Yeah, that whole like cookie cutter is literally across the board. Yeah,
man.
Absolutely.
So that's why it was so cool to write about sort of like mycological architecture and engineering and stuff like that in Mushroom Blues. Just kind of like, how can people think about architecture differently? How can people think about an environment differently? Engineering and these kinds of things, where we seem to have all of these fabricated solutions to things these days. To
Mm.
be like, you can buy a house in a box, and basically it just like, some carpenter and can just set it up for you. It's like that starts to degrade the
Mm.
not only the state of the individual but the state of the society on a whole as a whole.
It's like slapping a band-aid on. It's a quick
Hmm.
fix.
Yep,
It's not going to the root of the problem, the deep root of the
exactly.
problem. It's just slapping a plaster on it.
Yeah.
I also think that what you were saying about like architecture and that are like affecting our we've gone way off track here, but I don't care.
Dude, it's
Um,
fun.
yeah, but I think with like the whole shapes of it, I think the ordery sensory as well is very important because
Hmm.
like one of the things I find most nourishing is the sound of the wind through trees and
Hmm.
the sea. If I hear
Yep.
the sea, it is an instant like hit of almost
Right.
euphoria. And
Yeah,
I think that
which is
audio sensory thing goes with the visual aspect as well.
right, which is why you see people who have sleep aids, whether it's like a noise machine. What are the presets in the noise machine? White noise or some, like some variation on that, like brown noise or pink noise or whatever. Rain falling, ocean waves lapping against the shore,
Yeah,
a stream, like a little pebbles in a stream, and that sound of water rushing through a stream. Those are
yeah.
the presets for relaxation. And so it's kind of like that is directly associated with psychological examinations of the things that Lamia, what is the put in the chat the
Yeah.
onomatopoeic
The-
word for the wind and through the trees. But that is like a direct psychological association with like probably the people who make these sleep aids or the apps or whatever know this is the psychological effect that X, Y, and Z has on the human brain.
mm.
Hafif. Very cool.
Hafif. That's a
Um,
lovely word. It's almost a
mhm.
calming word to say as well.
Yeah.
Hafif.
It's a soft. Okay. So
Ah, right.
Afif.
Okay. Hafif.
Afif. Yeah. Except it's not a soft age. So it's like
Oh, it's not
Hafif.
soft. Hafif.
Yeah.
Ah, okay.
Live Arabic. See,
Yeah.
this is another opportunity for us to learn some Arabic.
Exclusive on the channel today.
Perfect. Yeah. But then you see that sort of replicated in, I think like holy spaces end up doing that particularly well because there was a lot of intention, whether it's like an Arabic mosque, whether it's a Jewish temple or a Christian church, whatever.
Mm.
These holy spaces really replicate through the ways in which the architecture augments sound to give a certain atmosphere to that space. And so it's like even if there are like open windows that allow wind to pass through, that will be very thought through in terms of how the wind passes through and the ways in which that affects the auditory atmosphere of that particular space. And so it's
Mm.
like we started to like degrade in so many ways when it comes to these sorts of things.
Yeah.
And like Diana was saying, it's like that, or no, Lamia was saying that extends to like literally everything in culture,
Mm.
from pop culture and the things that we consume to social media and how that affects our daily lives and our perceptions of ourselves, all these different things, how people perceive books and like the value of books and the
And our
value of
attention span.
entertainment. Right. It's like if you look at, when the Gutenberg press was invented and people started to mass produce the Bible, and the Bible, whatever your feelings are of Christianity and religion, the Bible was one of the main drivers for the spread of information and the spread of literacy. And what ended up happening is like you go from that, and then 500 years later, the ways in which people have capitalized books and capitalized literature and information, but then the ways in which people have degraded the relevance of it. Yeah, like attention span and TikTok. Like so many
Mm.
people's version of books is like, I'm gonna scroll through TikTok or I'm gonna scroll through Instagram or something like that,
Yeah.
which really sucks, man. It really sucks because it's like, even though, as like an author, um, I'm very aware of these things. I'm very aware of like what's necessary in order to get a book out there
Mm.
in front of people through social media and what have you. And I have a very strong love-hate relationship with social media. I can do it and I can market the fuck out of my book,
Yeah.
but it's not necessarily like I'm doing that with every ounce of joy that I have writing a book or creating a world or drawing or tattooing or something along those lines. And it's just a matter of how the industry has become commodified and how authors, like especially as indie authors, like I'm like Lamia, I'm sure has experienced this because she just launched a book. The ways in which self-published authors and traditionally published authors have to essentially be a multitude of jobs all at once. And it's
Mm.
like you have to be a writer and you have to be a good writer if you want your book to do well. On top of that, you have to be a marketer and a PR person and a social media like content creator, and you have to be a manager and an entrepreneur in the way that you manage, if you're on the self pub side of things, who you hire as a cover artist and an editor and all this different kind of stuff. If you hire a book tour company, blah blah blah, you have to be an accountant and managing your finances and all these different things. And so it's like, for anyone out there who wants to be an author, this is the blatant truth of the matter. Is it's this day and age, even if you have the backing of a traditional publishing house,
Mm.
it doesn't necessarily guarantee you success, and it doesn't necessarily dictate the amount of work that you have to put in. Because I know traditionally published authors who put in twice as much effort as self-pub authors, and the unfortunate truth of the matter is like, marketing is, for the most part, the biggest determining factor in terms of like how many people see your book, buy your book, read your book.
Mm.
And so it is this really unfortunate circumstance of how the progression of modern publishing has created these sort of barriers of necessity for anyone who wants to get involved in this whole thing. So it's like, you can't just write a book and then just like put it out there because it's gonna be like a fart on the wind.
Yeah. Read it. No.
Yeah, no, right? It's like, who are you?
Yeah.
What's your social media presence?
Yeah. Never
Are
heard
you
of you, mate.
doing?
Go
Yeah,
away.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So, extension of what Lamia and Diana have been and us have been talking about is like the sort of degradation that comes hand in hand with capitalism.
Mm. And I mean, self pub. Yes, you got complete control over your book and your world, but the flip side is you have to do all that stuff that you just mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
And then with trad publishing, of course, it's very much determined by the publishing house's market trend at that particular time and
Yep.
what kind of books they want to put out.
But
So
also
I
the
think,
gatekeeping of like, you have to get an agent first.
yeah,
Then that agent has to pitch your book to an editor. Your book could die on submission for a year, 2 years, So there are lots of different hurdles. And even as a self-published author, it's like, yes, you are in charge of all these different things, but that doesn't guarantee it's going to turn out well, because you yourself as a person have a certain set of expectations about things like what makes a good cover, what is marketable, typography and how your book looks, the way you format the interior of your book, or who you pay to do these certain kinds of things. So there, even as a self-published author, there are still decisions that you can make that result in a crappy book, regardless of how amazing you think it is, or a crappy book that is just, like the person who created that book. And you see this a lot in, like romance, for instance, lit RPG, which are these genres that are appealing to a much bigger audience, but much more
Mm.
consumable audiences, there are different expectations of like, well, what makes a good cover there versus what makes a good cover in SF or fantasy. So there are different genre expectations, not only for the story itself, but also about how your book looks and how it's marketed. Lit RPG authors don't have to market their books the same way that I do, or that Lamia does, or that any self-pub author has to. There's just different beasts.
Yeah.
And so, and even then, like within all of that, you can think you're doing an amazing job, and then it comes out and it just falls flat because someone else perceives what you view as your best possible effort. They view it as subpar or something that's they're just going to ignore. Adam, you are a genius and all your ideas are perfect. Just going to flatter the fuck out of your ego. Yeah.
You had a really interesting discussion on your podcast, SFF Addicts, where you talked about IPs and writing for existing IPs, because that's another thing that you could, that you know, if you're writing for an IP, there's a lot of other considerations to take into account there, isn't there?
Adam, it is on video and you can record that and keep it for yourself whenever you need a boost. It's like whenever you're feeling lonely, just go out, walk into a forest, and then turn on that clip of me saying, you are a genius and all your ideas are perfect.
On a loop with echo.
Yeah, exactly. But when it comes to IP, I mean, that's a whole different beast. That was a really interesting discussion to have with people who've dealt with some of the biggest IPs out there, you know, like specifically Mike Chen, who has worked with Star Trek and Star Wars and Marvel, which for anyone wanting to work in IP, those are like the top three. Probably more so Marvel and Star Wars. But that alone is like another area where it's like you kind of have to build a reputation. And I think within this industry, building a reputation is a huge part of it, regardless of what path you're going. So it's like hi Tim.
Hey Tim.
My reputation building was essentially like doing SFF Addicts first, and then using that as the sort of learning experience and launching pad for getting my author career going. And a lot of people give shit to content creators for doing this, which is like, it's a mixed bag, man. Like people who think like, oh, Daniel Green has like 500,000 plus subscribers. I guarantee you, when he started that channel, he had the intention of becoming a writer. And the thing is, like, building a platform doesn't necessarily equate to like, this is going to be a shitty product. People can still be good content creators and also be good writers and good world builders and whatnot. So the thing is like, it's a bit of a catch-all. It's a bit of an easy thing to say, like, oh, poo-poo a content creator who becomes an author. Like, that's the thing. I don't even want to like show you all my inbox trash bin, where it's like the amount of emails that I get from PR people. It's like, in the subject line, the next TikTok blah blah blah, TikTok sensation, TikTok blah blah blah, the next romantasy TikTok. I'm like, shut up. Like, I'm going to delete that email immediately, because from my perspective, it's not necessarily a poo-pooing of content creators who have gotten big on whichever platform, whether it be TikTok or YouTube or podcasting or wherever. It's the fact that it has become a marketing term that just frustrates the hell out of me. The content creators that are in the self-pub space, from my perspective, none of them are saying, you know, like, I know Daniel, and he's not saying like, you know, on the cover of his book, YouTube superstar, YouTube like blah blah blah, like YouTube sensation, his debut novel or anything like that. Like, he's not using his YouTube platform as necessarily like the sales pitch. He's using his books and the platform that he's built as a tangential means to get his book in front of potential readers. So
Yeah.
he's not saying like, I am a YouTube sensation, therefore you should pick up my book. I am a
Yeah.
TikTok sensation, therefore you should pick up my book. It is the fact that this content creator has put in the effort to build their audience, and it is a pre-built audience that they put a ton of effort into. And some segment of that audience is going to be interested in what that person has written because they're interested in what that person has produced as a content creator. And so I don't see any self-pub, like that I know personally, any self-pub content creators who are like, I'm not going to put anywhere in my book other than like my author bio that like,
Yeah.
I do SFF Addicts. You know, I'm not going to be like, not that SFF Addicts is that huge or anything anyways, but I'm not going to be like, podcasting sensation, debut fungal noir, blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, the content creation and the writing go hand in hand. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's like a good marketing tool, because for me personally, it puts me off more than anything. And then there are some people who are like, oh, you're a content creator, and then immediately dismiss whatever you've written.
Yeah, there's a preconceived idea of what your book might
Right.
be just because you're a content creator. Yeah.
Exactly. So from my perspective, it's like any PR person who sends me TikTok sensation, I'm going to be like, that doesn't sell me on a book.
Yeah. Trash.
So I'm just going to put it into the trash. Just the same way that I'm never going to pitch someone and be like, you like my podcast? And like, you know, I'm the podcasting sensation. Here's Mushroom Blues. Like, hopefully you like it. I'm never going to pitch people in that way. I'm going to pitch the book on its own merits.
Yeah.
And then anything else that comes with that is just a sort of side effect as opposed to like the main thing.
Yeah, subs aren't going to equate to readers, but it is a platform from which you can build
Right.
that from.
Right. Because it's a matter of building a reputation. It's like you have your YouTube channel, you're doing future fiction reviews. Yeah. Like viral TikTok books are never worth the hype.
Nope.
But that's something that a lot of publishers have latched on to is like, oh, you're big on TikTok. Well, guess what? A TikTok audience doesn't equate to a one-to-one readership audience. It's not like that at all. Like my podcasting audience is not like one-to-one. That person listens to my podcast, they're going to buy my book. It's not like that at all. It's just about building a reputation, whether it's as a content creator or a reviewer or just a person within the community, you know, like just getting yourself out there and familiarizing people with you, not being a dick is always a good rule.
Always helps.
Always helps. Always helps. And then over time, people will start to associate like, oh, this person's been really fun to interact with online. Like, oh, they have a book too. Maybe I'll check it out. Or at the very least, like go to your Amazon page or read the synopsis and what is this book about? Is it worth my time kind of thing. But having that reputation, whether you're self-pub and you're kind of like building everything from the ground up, or you're in trad pub and you're building yourself up, maybe you want to work for like Star Wars, no one's going to be like, oh, you don't exist on Twitter, you don't exist on Blue Sky or Instagram or anywhere, you've never written a book and you want to write for Star Wars. No one's ever going to accept that. Like, the thing is, you have to build your reputation no matter what path you're going down. And it's a matter of creating content that genuinely reflects you, and then people kind of like build this association with, I know Adrian from his presence on podcasts or social media or whatever, and you can get a sense of me as a person. You can get a sense of what my book is going to be about. You can get a sense if the book might appeal to you or not. Yeah, Diana's spot on right there. Yeah. It's like you can be super popular online, but I learned this as a tattoo artist as well. That regardless of how many followers you have on social media, that doesn't, like in my time as a tattoo artist, it didn't equate to people who actually came to me to get a tattoo.
Yeah.
There's a difference between someone liked my 60-second TikTok video or someone likes my tattoo post on Instagram versus someone who is genuinely interested in me as a person, genuinely interested in my art, whether it's a book, whether it's a tattoo, what have you. to the point where they're going to consciously make a decision to invest money in whatever you've created. There's a huge difference there.
Yeah.
And TikTok does not necessarily, as like a platform and the way it functions, doesn't necessarily work for marketing yourself. I feel like in the book sphere, it works really well for talking about books and promoting books as a community and as a thing, promoting reading, talking about your 10 favorite series, or here's 5 books to read if you like X, Y, or Z. Not to say like, I'm going to go on TikTok and basically just be like, buy my book, buy my book, buy my book. No one's going to be interested in that. And you're just going to fall flat. So.
Yeah, I mean, my partner, she's a freelance artist and designer, and she has a very love-hate relationship with Instagram as well, because, you know, she'll see another artist who has thousands and thousands of subs and everything, and I keep telling her that does not equate to sales. That does not equate to what your business model is and the sales you're doing. And it can be quite a battle to kind of mentally not attach yourself to subs and follows and likes, you know, particularly if you're running a small business.
Exactly. Yeah. So my rule of thumb has always been just to post and ghost. It's like, just to not overly engage with these platforms, because I know it doesn't really, I mean, there's so many things that can just mess with your head. So yeah, like Dark Star's book cover, and like it can be demoralizing to look at numbers. It can be demoralizing to constantly refresh your KDP, like Amazon sales, or your Goodreads to see like if you got a new rating or a review. There are just way too many avenues that you can dig yourself into a deep dark hole of anxiety and self-judgment. So
exactly. It's the same with running a booktube channel. You know, I can look at other channels like, you know, Mike's Book Reviews and Daniel Green, who have made an incredible large channel, and then I look at mine and go, you know, but I don't care, because I have created a small community for myself here.
Right. Exactly.
That I love, and I just don't look at the numbers anymore. I just don't really care. I just care about the community and the discussion that we have on here.
Exactly. And that's my mentality with the podcast too.
Yeah.
And Lamia, I had a great time growing and eating the mushroom book too. It was lovely. My son helped me he helped me mist my mushrooms every day. It was beautiful.
How has SFF Addicts been 2024? Because you nearly come to a close now for the year. How's it been for you this year?
It's been good, man. Yeah. I mean, MJ and I just have a great time doing the show.
Yeah.
And we've talked with some really amazing authors. And I think for me, it's a lot about what you're talking about and what Lamia is saying right here, like genuine interactions and making those meaningful connections. And for us, just being able to meet all these different authors and to chat with them and pick their brains. And for me, like, I started the podcast in order to through the veil of professionalism, to learn as much as I could from different authors.
Yeah.
And it has worked amazingly well. And I love to be able to continue to do it, because it's continuous inspiration for me to keep writing and to keep doing my thing. And able to give that knowledge to other people, to be like, here's a writing masterclass that maybe is exactly what you're looking for right now. Like, you want to start learning about omniscient point of view, like, here you go. So that has been really, really nice. And
I love those masterclasses. They've been like, I've literally got a notebook full of notes I've taken from all those.
Me and MJ too. MJ and I take notes every episode. So I've got like a stack of notebooks right here on my desk, just from SFF Addicts over the past few years. And so for me, like, that makes it all worth it. And you know, like, life changes and things happen, and I'm just really grateful that I'm able to do that as sort of like a consistent part of my life, and also as a way to fuel my own writing. Because it's kind of amazing that I started this journey in 2021 with the intention of publishing my own book, and here we are in 2024, and I did that.
That's nice.
And now I'm going to keep going. And
it's a good journey. Good journey.
I'm really, really happy about that. And we got an announcement coming up on the 20th as well. I can tell you off air, but
Okay.
Just stay tuned for that.
Exciting.
We got some exciting things happening on the podcast, but yeah, we've already got some amazing guests lined up for next year. So I'm just yeah, man. I mean, it's just gonna keep rolling. It's gonna keep rolling.
Yeah.
We're gonna keep providing content for people.
Excellent stuff.
Yeah.
What are you reading right now, Adrian?
I am reading. It is definitely a very lonely journey without all these things. Yeah. So not only just like building your reputation as a part of the community, it's kind of like counteracting the loneliness that is this journey. Because whether you're a reader or a writer, both are lonely journeys until you decide I'm going to talk to other people about it. So it's like be a part of the community if you feel like you love this thing and you want to share it with other people. Man, there's so many people out there. Like we were talking about off air about Dragonsteel, like Expo, and I was like, that's just a bunch of people who love like this one author's books, but then now it's become something bigger where other authors go and are able to promote their books and do panels and all this different kind of stuff. So this journey is only as lonely as you want it to be, is what I've discovered. As for what I'm currently reading, I'm reading Lightfall by Ed Crocker. Good friend of mine. He created this like epic fantasy world of vampires and werewolves, and I'm all here for it. Like
Very cool.
Yeah, I love it. So if you like the more political intrigue of something like Game of Thrones or Richard Swan's The Justice of Kings.
I love that series.
Yeah, so this is kind of like that vibe, but with vampires and other monsters. So it's very cool. And then I'm finishing up City of Last Chances by Adrian Tchaikovsky.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I need to start that series.
it's good. It's very good.
But
The thing is, like with a lot of Adrian's books, it's like I read them very slow, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. He's just not like a fast-paced writer. But what I realize is like when I get to the end of a book, I'm like, man, I savored every word of every page, and I find myself very absorbed in the world and what the characters are doing. So it's like it's been a slow read for me, but very, very cool, more experimental in terms of what Adrian's done before.
Yeah, I'm the same with Adrian Tchaikovsky because his worlds are just so intricate and such depth. You kind of have to soak it all in, don't you?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And it's like he writes long too. He does have some short stuff, but it's like man loves a chunky book.
Not as much as Peter F. Hamilton. The man can't write a book. He can't write a book under 1,000 pages.
That's true. Exodus is his.
Look at them.
Yeah. His newest book, Exodus, is like 900 something. That's probably on the shorter end of Peter's books.
It's a weapon as a hardback as well.
Yeah, dude. Yeah.
Excellent. I'm currently reading a classic, Rendezvous with Rama by Arthur C. Clarke. I thought I'd explore some. I always say I love science fiction, but I've not really delved into the classics. Like the 50s, 60s, and 70s authors. So I'm kind of mixing them in with some modern authors, and you can really tell how prose has changed over the decades. I mean, Arthur C. Clarke, I'm like 30 pages in and there's been hardly any dialogue. It's a lot of exposition, but that's just how they wrote back in the 70s. It's just telling me everything. So you kind of have to adjust your brainwaves of how you read it, but it's good.
At some point you should dabble in some Philip K. Dick.
Yes. I've read Only Sheep Sleep Dream, whatever the title is.
Sleep,
that's
dream,
the one.
Sheep, whatever the fuck it's called.
That one. I read that one many years ago.
Do sheep dream of electric androids? I don't know what that.
That's one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I read that one many years ago, but it's probably due a reread because my mind's a bit more mature now than it was back when I read it.
If you want something a little bit like more on like the weird end, you can get into like I think some of his short story collections are good. A Scanner Darkly is fantastic. That one's shorter. It's more like a novella. And then The Man in the High Castle is fantastic as well.
Yeah,
That
I really
one, that
enjoyed the
one.
TV series actually.
Yeah, so you watched the TV series, okay?
Yeah, it
Yeah,
was quite good. Yeah,
yeah. Read the book, and I think you'll find it very interesting to like
cool.
compare the two. It's not as like crazy drastic as the difference between Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep and Blade Runner.
Mm,
That is like a very, very loose adaptation.
yeah,
The
yeah,
Man in the High Castle takes a lot of direct inspiration from the book.
cool. Definitely read that book. I just finished this as well. Neil Asher.
Nice.
It's Gridlinked, first book in his Polity series. There's mycelium in this. I'll have you
Ooh.
know. Yeah, some mycelium stuff in it.
Neil, speaking
So
to my heart.
it's good. I literally just finished this afternoon. Before
Amazing.
we go, we have to talk about Slow Horses
Yeah,
because I know me and you have spoken about it online, but man, probably one of the best TV series on streaming in a very, very long time.
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, this is something that really bothers me. So like going back to what we've been talking about like kind of consumer culture and commodification of things. British, for some reason, like British TV shows know the sweet spot when it comes to serialized TV.
Mm.
That's something North America could definitely learn from. Where I'm like, Slow Horses, give me those 6 episodes.
Oh, it's
Like
fantastic.
6 episodes, very tight story plotting and characterization and everything, just like expertly done,
Mm.
like so well acted. But the thing is, like, that show starts with an amazing script.
Yeah.
And if that was an American TV show, probably it would be like 10 episodes, 12 episodes. Things would be drawn out unnecessarily. Whereas like Slow Horses knew exactly. I mean, funny enough, it's called Slow Horses. It's not that slow. Um, but that show just like knew exactly what it wants to do with every single season of storyline that it has. So it's
Yeah.
like this character is going like there's an efficiency of storytelling there that I really appreciate. But it's like they're able to get a good deal of character depth despite it being efficient. It's like they
Yeah.
know exactly what they want this character to do and how that's going to reflect upon their actions in the present, but also their backstory and things that they've done to get to this point.
Yeah, it's quite a minimalist way of telling a
Mm-hmm.
story, but when you get actors like Jack Loudon and Thingamajig as oh come on, his name escapes me now. Lead guy, the old guy,
Gary
Gary
Oldman.
Oldman. That's it.
Old guy.
Old guy. He's not that old.
Gary Old guy.
Sorry, Gary. But when you get actors like them,
Mm-hmm.
they do a lot of the work as well, just with their acting. So
Yep.
it's fantastic. And another thing that Slow Horses does really well, which kind of reminds me of like your characters, is they're not very likable. They're some really
Yeah.
horrible characters, but they are so compelling and
Mm-hmm.
engaging as well.
Yeah. That shows a masterclass in so many different things.
Yeah.
And like Gary Oldman's character, he's despicable and disgusting. Kurt North is going to call him Gary Old Guy from now on. Hey man, it's like it's not really far from the reality, so it's okay.
Thanks, Scott. Yeah.
Yeah.
Calling Gary Old Guy. Brilliant.
But he's a despicable, disgusting character.
Yeah.
But there's so much of him that is utterly captivating. Like I was telling my wife, I've never hated watching someone eat more than I have this character in this show, but I cannot look away. It's
Yeah.
like the human capacity for sort of like danger and violence and things like that. Like it's like going down a highway and there's a ton of traffic, and the traffic is all because people are watching what happened in a car accident. Like there's just something innate in human nature where it's just like I know that I shouldn't be that captivated by something, but I just am. And Gary Oldman's entire character is that. Like
Yeah.
I'm disgusted by everything that you do. And it's like, don't take off your shoes, man. Don't put your dirty sock feet on the table. And it's just like, it's for some reason. It's like such good character because everything he does is logical and consistent with who he is and how he perceives the world and how he does not give a shit about anybody else around him. but you can't look away. You want to see
Yeah.
more. You want to know what he does next. And that is just for me like extremely good storytelling and extremely good characterization.
Yeah. It's the way the camera, like when he puts his feet on the desk, the camera is literally an
Yeah.
inch away from his
Yeah, yeah.
feet, and
Yeah.
there's a hole in it, and it's just like, it's just this,
And
it's just
you
this.
can tell these socks have been worn like
Oh
10
yeah,
times. It's like that shit ain't washed.
yeah,
Dudes having like sink showers. Oh God.
yeah, and you can tell that Ariel guy he's having the time of his life as well,
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
playing this character. But it's interesting because he doesn't. Well, he gives he gives the impression that he doesn't give a shit about anybody. But I think
Mhm.
deep down, the more the series gets on,
Yeah.
he maybe not likes, but almost respects
Mhm.
his team in a very, very, very small way,
Yeah.
particularly Jack Loudon's character.
Exactly. And he says it pretty well. I can't remember exactly what he says, so I'm paraphrasing, but he's like, like everybody in the slow horse is essentially just like a failure, like
Mm,
a deadbeat within the eyes of MI5 and within the apparatus of the intelligence services. And
yeah,
so for him, he's like, you know, it doesn't matter how shitty or like how little he thinks of these people, whether he wants to call them like assholes or just like garbage or whatever, but he's like, they're mine. These are
mm,
my people. And
yeah,
so you fuck with my people, you fuck with me, which is something that I really love. And it doesn't take much to convey this kind of information. It's just the right person saying the right line at the right time.
yeah,
And you can just speak volumes about this is how this person has viewed, because I think that was in like season 3 or 4. That is how this character, our old guy, has viewed all of the people that are under his employment
yeah,
for the entirety of the show. So regardless of how much he conveys outwardly, y'all suck, deep down he's like,
yeah,
regardless of how much you suck, I'll still take care of you.
yeah. And you also get a sense that the job has kind of made him the person he is today as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of destroyed him as a human being, but
Yeah, yeah,
but despite being a slob and disgusting and sat behind a desk in Slough House, he's still a bloody good spy, and he's very, very
exactly.
good at his job.
Yeah.
And that's what I love about the way that character is kind of created. It's great.
Mm-hmm. So for anyone
Yeah,
who hasn't seen it, highly recommend
yo,
Slow
absolutely,
Horses.
highly recommend it.
Yeah.
Definitely, definitely. Well, I think we're coming to the hour and a half mark, and I think that might be a good place to end it. But I'm going to ask you one final question, which
Okay.
is what I'm going to ask all my authors because it's a good, fun question. It's your final dinner party. You have 6 spaces. Which authors, historical figures,
Ooh,
celebrities, actors, significant figures would you choose as your 6 dinner party mates?
damn. Okay. This is a good one. Okay. Um, let's say like every person at the table has a different profession. So I'm gonna choose Ken Watanabe because he is an
Choice.
exceptional actor,
Yeah.
and essentially he's like my dream casting for Koji. Um, of course, that's the whole fun of it.
Yeah, I did Talami as
Okay,
well.
yeah. So we've got Ken Watanabe, we've got Hayao Miyazaki, the founder of Studio Ghibli, because he's just fascinating, and him and
Mm.
Ken can like talk Japanese to each other and talk shit about everyone else at the table.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so we've got those two. I'm also going to pick. I'm going to pick Adrian Tchaikovsky as my author because I just love hanging out with him, and he's a very intelligent conversationalist. So that's 3. Um, I'm gonna cheat and I'm gonna pick MJ Kuhn because she's just like my wingman, and I think she and I that would allow us a lot more um, command over the dinner
Yeah.
table.
She'd be
Okay,
annoyed
so
if you didn't invite her as well, I
I know
think.
she would be. She would be. It's like my wife's gonna be annoyed that I didn't invite her. Okay, so I've got those. I've got those 4. So I got 2
Yeah.
more. Okay. Um, I'm gonna pick. Ooh, okay. I want to pick like an artist. Okay, I got one. David Choi, who's an American artist, but he's like super quirky and just fucking out there and paints weird shit and creates weird shit. And I just think he would be an absolutely fun time to have
Yeah.
at the party as well. This is very eclectic gathering of
It
people.
is a very eclectic dinner
Okay,
party.
so I got five. So I got one
Yeah.
more.
One
Okay.
more.
I think I would like a musician. I think that would be fun. Who would be a good musician to invite? Damn. Okay, this is a difficult one. Let's see. Oh man, I'm stumped here now.
Yeah.
I confined myself to musician, and now I'm stumped.
Who's the blues guy you were talking about earlier on?
Daryl Davis. Yeah,
Yeah.
Daryl Davis would be great. But I also just thought of someone else, so it's not
Oh,
not a
okay.
musician. Brian Greene, who is
Yeah.
who's a physicist from the UK, and it's just someone who's like absolutely fascinating to listen to him talk about the universe and about physics and sort of like the fundamentals of the cosmos.
He's the
A
guy who led the
very
superstring theory, isn't it? Isn't he?
exactly.
Yeah.
He's a very, very fascinating person. And I think he would just be like, he would just add like another dynamic. I could see him and like Adrian Tchaikovsky, just
get
like
on, wouldn't they?
hitting it
Yeah.
off. So yeah, I think that's my. Oh no, Brian Greene's American. He's an American physicist, but
Yeah.
he's very interesting to listen to. Talk about very intelligent things, but boiling them down into a more simplified manner. Like him, I would basically just like sit him and Tchaikovsky next to each other and just like eavesdrop the whole time.
Yeah. That's a good table, man. That's a really good table. Nice eclectic mix there.
Yeah, man.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for joining me, Adrian. It's been a
Thank you,
fantastic hour and a half. It's been really, really good. Thank you for coming.
No, I appreciate it, man. Thank you so much.
No problem at all. If you haven't read Mushroom Blues, go out and buy it and read it. It's incredible. There you go.
I just submitted the audiobook last night, so hopefully that's going to
Ooh.
be on Audible within the next couple weeks.
Excellent, excellent. So
yeah.
all you audiobook fans can
Yeah,
do that.
narrated
as well.
by Imogen Church, who's done some incredible work, both on audiobooks, but also she's like, screen acting and all kinds of stuff. Thank you for listening, Lamia, and everyone.
Yeah, thank you
all.
everyone for popping in. It's been great interacting with you with all your comments. Thank you very much, and I think we'll leave it there for today. Thank you very much, guys. The next Authors Behind the Page will be in January. I think we're just confirming dates and times. I'm not going to tell you who it is yet until the new year because I'm just keeping it a surprise.
Yeah.
And my last live session will be with Shells from Not So Secret Bookaholic, and that will be on Wednesday evening. To join us there as we do content creator chats and talk about all our burning issues and books and booktube and all that kind of stuff. So
so much trauma.
book trauma. So thank you very much, guys. Good night or good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Thank you very much, and we shall see you very soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.